Hello everyone. Last time we left off with our post-processing and we did a simple shader which was just grayscale shader, and this time we're going to do something a bit differently. And with this video you're going to know how to manipulate this post-processing a bit more and a bit further. So what we're going to do is use this, I use this ice texture, and then we're going to combine that effect with the image here so that we have some kind of icy basically just some kind of ice in our image so that it appears all icy and stuff. And for that I just used some textures from OpenGameArt, and it was done by author is N4 apparently. Anyway, I'm going to link it in the description of the video, and then also it's going to be added in your assets as well, at least in end code for this video. And for the start code you can just edit. I already added it. It's ice01, but you can use any other texture, and then you can also combine it with any other texture as you please. But for now we're just going to use this, and then in order to start I'm just going to add this texture to a content here, and I'm going to call it, well, ice texture is probably fine. So yeah, I can just edit here, public static ice texture is of type texture, so we're going to need it. And then I can just say here this ice texture is a texture assets ice, it's called i0 and it's of type 01 and it's JPEG. Alright, we have that. Then further, what we're going to need to do is basically, well, we can start with shader. So we're going to create a new shader type, and I'm just going to call it post-process textured shader. It's probably fine. Alright, let me see something. That's fine. So, or just texture. So the point of this shader is to basically merge two texture. One texture is going to be our scene, the other texture is going to be this ice texture. So let's do that, and I can just copy from our grayscale shader with our texture shader, and then we can modify it here a bit. So we have our texture, let's just call it texture 0. So this is screen texture, not screen texture, it's actually scene texture. Let's call it scene texture, and we're going to have other. Sample 2D, we can just call it a texture 1. We can give different names, it doesn't really matter. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to mix them together. So we have our T0, and then we can have our T1. So our screen, other texture, and then we can mix them together like this. So we're mixing T0, T1. Let's just use 0.5. You're going to see how it works, but basically it linearly interpolates between the colors of textures, right? So if you pass 0.9, it's going to be closer to second texture, and then coincidentally if you put 0, it's going to use fully the first texture. So you're going to see how it works, but we also need, it needs to be vector 4 since this is vector 3. We're going to use it like this, and then just pass 0.1 for alpha, and that's it. So further we had this grayscale effect, and I'm going to call this one texture effect, since any random texture can be used. New file, texture effect, and then let's just copy grayscale effect fully because it's going to be very similar. Alright, so let's just modify it here. Fragment shader source is our texture shader. It's not called grayscale, it's called texture effect. So what are we going to need here? Well, here it's going to be almost the same. Everything remains the same except that we're going to have private texture. So what we're going to need is we have, okay, perfect. So we have two textures, so we need to know their locations. So this location will correspond to, well, basically our shader locations, right? You're going to see it in a second. So we had texture 0, texture 1. So let's do just that. We can assign them somewhere over here. Probably fine. And then texture, and they're actually called hue texture 0. And then texture 1. So we need to know that these locations, when we try to pass multiple textures to our shader, we need to assign texture units. We're going to see how it works as well. But let's go further. What we're going to need. So we have that. We had our GL texture. Maybe I should rename this. Actually, it can remain as this. And then we're going to have our texture. Let's just say combine texture. The name is not important. This is texture that will be mixed with screen texture, or scene, not screen, scene texture. All right, let's have that, and let's say that it can be null. And then what we need to do is, let's see, we have that, we have our texture locations. We can just create a small method which is going to be set texture. So we're going to set this combine texture with set texture, and then now we need to set up those after we bind everything. So here, set which texture units to render it. So on this, sorry, uniform. So now we need to use those texture locations. So we're going to bind texture unit 0 location to texture unit 1, texture unit 2, and you can have multiple units. Usually it's 8 or 16, I think. But usually you have to query for that because it can depend on your GPU how many texture units you're going to have. If it's mobile, usually it's less, but nowadays usually standard is, I think, maybe even 32. I don't know by heart. But let's see further. Let's set. Let's do this. Set each texture to its texture unit. So we're going to activate texture 0, and we're going to set. This is going to set B. So we're using texture unit 0, right? And then we're setting, this will be our, well, basically scene texture. So we can remove this bind here, and then we're going to use this other texture. So active texture is texture 1. So we're 0 based, like it's usually in programming. And then we can just ask here for texture, right? So if you remember, our texture, combined texture, is just a wrapper around GL texture. So we're passing that, and that's it pretty much. Yes, we're unbinding the texture, that's good. And we can also set just so that we bind, sorry, we're going to set active texture to texture 0, otherwise we might have problem. Usually, if you're changing stuff like this, you usually want to set it to default, which is in this case texture 0. So that's it for this effect. Now, only thing left to do is actually to create it and then use it. So we're going to have public create texture effect in our effect factory. So it's not grayscale, right? It's texture effect. And so we'll just return effect. we paste stuff as usually. We can go now to our main. And we hit here grayscale effect. We're just now going to create texture effect. We have our texture. We're not going to use grayscale, rather we're going to use texture effect. And here, but we also need to set up our texture, which texture effect is going to use. So set texture, set texture, content, ice texture. Of course, we have some issues. Let me figure them out. So let's see, inspect console identifier. Okay, I think it's bug in fragment shader. Right, I was copy pasting, that's expected. So let's see, texture 0, texture 0. All right, that was it. Only that small bug, and you can already see how it kind of works. So you can control this effect here a bit. So if you pay 0.25, it's less icy. If you pay 0, it's completely original texture, although it needs to be double here. If you pay 0 line, you get full ice texture. So it's easy way to actually change the textures as well. So you can just use, basically what I'm saying is you can use any texture that you want. It doesn't need to be this ice texture. But let's go further with this. Let's say that we wanted to paste this mix value so that it's easier to use. So we can do just that easily. You can say uniform float u mix value, basically, and then we can use that mix value. So in our texture effect, so we can just query for it and then pass it. So similar to this texture location, so we're going to have mix value location, WebGL uniform location. We need to query for it, similar to this one. This mix value location, mix value, we get that mix value, and we're actually going to have to use some value for it. So we can say here public mix value is 0, is 0.25, let's say. That's fine. That's some default value, and then we can use it finally, and we can just set it here. It's probably fine. This GL uniform 1F for float. We're sending our location, right? We're saying which location, where is it in shader, and then what's the value. We're passing it. You can already see it kind of works, but let's go a bit further with this. So what I want to do is just to have some kind of a slider so that we can control that value, and I can do that probably here. We're just going to say label, or it's going to be mix. So let's just say mix, and then we can have input type range, ID is mix, name is mix, min is 0, max is 1, because we're going from 0 to 1. Let's just say 0.5 or 0.25. Let's just use that as default, as it looks good. And then step, let's just say 0.01. So that's our step. We have our mix value, and we just now need to connect it. And then that we can do easily here. Let's just say here. Window get element, no, sorry, that's not window, it's document. Get element by ID, it was called mix, and then we can say on change. What are we getting here? Element. All right, let me see, is this correct? I don't think it is. Let's actually use an event listener. So input, whenever there is an input, we're sending our element. So we can say our input is as add the target, right, as HTML input element, so we get that element, and then we can set our what is it called, texture effect, that mix value, and then we just fetch the value of an element, and here I just need to close it, and as you can see, now we can be more or less icy. So basically that's how it works. So that's it for this video. In the next video we're going to go even further, and we're going to have, well, basically we're going to have to render the two off-screen textures, and we're going to render different values. But that's for next video. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. You can already play with this, use different textures, use even multiple textures, right? You now know how to use multiple textures, so you can use those texture units from, let's say, texture unit 2, texture unit 3. You can go further. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and until next time.